Hello and welcome to another episode of India and Global Left. If you are new to the show, please smash that subscribe button. Also consider becoming a YouTube member, a Patreon, or donate small amount given in the link in the description box. But the least you could do is to watch this show, like, share, and comment. Without further ado, let me welcome our guest tonight, Ambassador Chas Freeman. Ambassador Freeman is a former American ambassador. He is an author and an important political commentator, especially within the independent media field. Ambassador Freeman, welcome back to India and Global Left.
Glad to be with you, Joshi.
We have been covering the new ceasefire in agreement in Gaza. And Israeli military forces have been evacuating from parts of Gaza. It must be noted that that's just a part of Gaza, not the entirety. There are videos and reports about people moving from south to the north, not necessarily because conditions are habitable there, but some people to take a glance at their destroyed homes, others for different reasons. It's really a moving picture as I'm looking at the TV. What's your impression of the significance of this ceasefire?
Well, it has yet to be established as an effective ceasefire. Basically, what we have is yet another hostage exchange accompanied by a ceasefire. And we've had this before in the case of Gaza. It is how the hostages, the Israeli hostages and the Palestinian hostages held in Israeli jails, many on trumped up charges or no charges at all, have been released in the past. The other thing about this is, of course, that Israel has a perfect record of violating every ceasefire it agrees to. The case of Lebanon is in point. Israel agreed to withdraw from Lebanon, agreed to a ceasefire. It has not withdrawn from Lebanon. It has violated the ceasefire 4,600 times. So there is a very strong possibility, given the fractious politics on both sides, that there will be a violation of a ceasefire. If it comes from the Palestinian side, even if it's not Hamas, if it's Islamic Jihad or some other group in Gaza that violates the ceasefire, that will be attributed by Israel to Hamas, and it will be used as a justification for resuming the full-scale bombing. You noted that the Israeli pullback, not a withdrawal, is to about 60% of Gaza. 40% is now not directly occupied by the Israelis, but of course they still occupy Gaza. They're still there. And in Israel, the politics which mirror those in Gaza, Hamas is relatively reasonable. Some other factions are not. In Israel, we have the Messianic Zionist ultra-right saying they don't accept the ceasefire, even though the war cabinet voted for it. We have Prime Minister Netanyahu saying that he plans to resume the war. Evidently, President Trump put a lot of pressure on him. But the example of Lebanon, again, is opposite. That pressure will not continue. In the case of Lebanon, the United States, which has a virtual viceroy in the person of our ambassador to Ankara, Turkey, Tom Barak, has not put pressure on the Israelis. To the contrary, Barak has basically endorsed Israel's treatment of its neighborhood as an unregulated bombing range, where it can bomb anything and everything, whether it moves or not. And so I'm not convinced that this is more than another misleading flash in the pan, not a serious long-term agreement. Let me say here that the whole issue that has been solved is the hostage issue. But that is not the issue in Gaza or between Israel and Palestine. The issue is Palestinian self-determination. The issue is Israeli genocide of Palestinians. The issue is Israeli failure, refusal to recognize any rights on the part of the Palestinians, their demonization and dehumanization. None of that has changed, nor has Israel's Zionism's ambition to expel all Palestinians from Palestine. While we're looking at a ceasefire for a short time, probably, in my view, in Gaza, the Israelis are busily evicting people from their homes in the West Bank. So I think I'm very skeptical. I know because the issue has been misdefined as a hostage issue, everybody's jubilant. Okay, I'm very happy that the hostages on both sides are being released. I assume the Israelis will honor that part of the agreement. I know that Hamas will do its best to do so. And I'll just conclude by saying that in releasing the hostages on its side, Hamas doesn't give up very much because the possession of those hostages has demonstrably failed to persuade Israel to negotiate with any sincerity about any of the fundamental issues. And the only thing that can be said finally on this is that Hamas took the hostages and broke out of the open-air concentration camp of Gaza on October 7th, 2 years ago, because of several reasons. First, it had been subjected to intolerable abuse. That is, Palestinians in Gaza had been subjected to intolerable abuse for 2 decades, and they had nothing to lose. But second, and more important, Hamas, in organizing that breakout, was trying to put the Palestinian self-determination issue back on the global docket, and they have succeeded at that. Whatever the failure militarily may have been, and I don't expect they had any doubts whatsoever that the Israeli response would be horrifying, they have won the propaganda war.
We have breaking news on the some of the names of the captive exchange. Earlier, there were huge speculations about some high-profile Palestinians, particularly Marwan Barghouti from the Fatah, with which Hamas has a very good relationship, but also Ahmed Sadat of the PFLP and a couple of important Hamas leaders like Hassan Salmeh and Abbas al-Sayed. Israeli media has now published the 250 names who were suffering from life imprisonment, and they do not contain any of these names. Of course, the Palestinian Prisoners Office has said that there has been still no agreement on this, and we'd be publishing it if since as soon as there is an agreement. What a lot of people were speculating that if these leaders could be released, that would be rejuvenating the Palestinian movement, at least people like Marwan Barghouti having bipartisan support among Palestinians would be very good for the eventual step of a Palestinian statehood, which also needs a Palestinian movement. It seems to me it's very clear that Israel is not going to allow that.
Well, I'm not at all surprised that they haven't, for precisely the reasons you mentioned. This would rejuvenate Palestinian nationalist leadership if they were released. I note that Marwan Barghouti's wife went to Cairo, presumably in anticipation of his being released, and she's obviously been disappointed. Let me make a broad comment here again about this so-called agreement. This is a typical Donald Trump maneuver. That is, he announces an agreement, but there are no details. The details all have to be worked out. This doesn't work, and even in business, let alone in diplomacy. So we don't know, we don't know, as you just said, we didn't know who was to be released on the in the Palestinian prisoner category. We don't know when and how much the Israelis will actually withdraw. I know that they continued bombing Gaza right up to the moment of the agreement. They're going into effect. This obviously is a message that they're quite prepared to come back. And they probably will, in my view, for the reasons I mentioned. So I think as I said, the jubilation is premature. If we are going to try to create peace as opposed to pacify the Palestinians, then there's going to have to be a level of bargaining and a restoration of trust, or the establishment of trust between the parties, that is totally lacking. I think Hamas and the Palestinians generally, I'm not going to say anything very kind about the Palestinian Authority, which is basically a subcontractor for the occupation. But I think, it's perfectly obvious, it has been for decades, that wherever there's occupation, there's resistance. And not only is that a law of political science, if you will, but it's enshrined in international law. The Palestinians have the right to resist, including armed resistance. And to say that Israel has a right to defend itself is to say Israel has a right to occupy Palestine in the manner that it has, which it does not have the right to do. There's ample international law, Geneva Conventions, UN Security Council resolutions, a long history of negotiations, which make that clear. So I don't think this particular agreement moves anything closer to peace.
You mentioned about the lack of detail, and that's obviously correct. But to the extent that we have some detail, it should be discussed that the four agreements, 4 points of major points of agreements, cessation of hostility in exchanges of captives, and the two additional points of allowing of humanitarian aid, which has not yet started, but Israel has promised that they would allow 600 trucks through the UN and the related agency, which they had been blocking all this while, and then the partial withdrawal of Israeli forces. All of these are built on the so-called 20-point Trump peace plan. And that same plan, supposedly on which the second and third and fourth phase would be built upon, has unacceptable clauses like total demilitarization of Gaza, surrendering of Hamas, all of which have not been agreed to and would most likely never been agreed upon. What's your sense of what would happen in the second and third and fourth phase?
I think very little will happen. I think that we've had an agreement before when phase one was implemented. Phase two and three, in that case, 3 phases, this case 4, did not get in. The phases 2 and 3 did not get implemented. Israel repudiated the agreement. I don't see any reason to believe that this experience will be any different. And here, let me say again, it is not good practice to announce an agreement in phases where the more difficult phases have been pushed back and not agreed. And I note that this so-called peace plan, which isn't a peace plan, it's a plan for the defanging of Hamas, and the removal of all Palestinian ability to defend themselves. This was not coordinated at all with any Palestinian, not even the Palestinian Authority, which is very responsive to the money that the United States gives to it, and that Israel, and very responsive to Israel, with which it cooperates in the occupation. Certainly Hamas wasn't consulted. So I think what we have in the case of the Hamas decision to release the hostages is an expedient decision, that they didn't have much to lose by doing that, and might even gain a little goodwill. But I suspect what will now be revealed is that Israel wasn't ever really concerned about the issue of the hostages, wasn't ever really concerned about Hamas per se, but is trying to annihilate, exterminate, erase Palestinian nationalism, which it will not succeed in doing. And let me make a final observation here, and that is, if you deny those who are being occupied and killed and maimed and denied medical care and food of a means of alleviating their suffering, and you drive them into exile, which is what Israel's trying to do, then you've got an enemy that's global, not local. And I think it's very likely that since this agreement is so blatantly one-sided and unfair, that some Palestinians at least will take up arms against Israelis everywhere. And here I know that I think there are about 7.5 million Palestinians in the diaspora, all over the world, not just in the Arab world, but in other countries. And they have every motivation now to extend the conflict to Israelis or the supporters of Israelis around the world. So I would not be surprised to see that. I think that would be tragic. But it is a natural result of an incredibly misguided approach to producing peace in the Holy Land.
That same agreement mentions the very important question about Palestinian statehood at the very last point. The 28th point was about Palestinian statehood, and it says, if everything else goes fine, then we will arrange for talks and negotiations between the Palestinians and Israelis. And we is the Trump here, Trump and the Blair and Witkoff, reminiscence of the mandate here. So it's in fact, I think in Palestine, it's fair to say never ended. They have been ruling Palestine by mandate for more than 100 years. Let me not play a devil's advocate, but raise a point that some analysts are making about at least the ceasefire, not about a comprehensive peace plan, but ceasefire in the sense of moving away from the genocide, the genocidal scale. They're saying that Trump has personally invested this time, which is different from the January through March phase, which was mostly negotiated by the Biden-Harris administration. And this time they are more serious. What's your response to that line of argument?
Well, I think that was crucial. Khalil Hayya, the Hamas spokesman, played great emphasis on Trump's personal guarantee of the agreement and its various stages. But I have to say, the Trump record doesn't support much confidence in that. And so we have a man who's very changeable, very mercurial, very much in the Israeli pocket. It wasn't so long ago that Netanyahu was running around claiming control of Trump, which he demonstrated he had on numerous occasions. Is there a reason to believe he's lost that control? I don't think so. In fact, we see, I think there are things that are happening globally and in my country that are adverse to Israel, very much so. Israel has lost the youth, including the Jewish youth, in the United States, with a few exceptions. And the response to that is for a bunch of Zionist billionaires to buy TikTok and try to manipulate the algorithm so that it censors information about Israel and provides positive information about Israel to the very large number of young people, about 70%, who get all their news from TikTok, which is a frightening thought, I must say. anyway, I think we're seeing a tremendous effort by Israel. I think they put $145 million declared money into manipulation of social media in the United States, a project of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs in Israel. They're obviously feeling pretty desperate, cornered. I mean, when you look at the level of demonstrations now in Europe, which has been a bastion of pro-Israeli support, in part because, as you implied, Israel has been a European mandate, a British mandate, and that just carried over in the resolution establishing a Jewish homeland there in the UN, which, of course, the Israelis immediately violated. The partition was not carried out in the way that had been authorized, but by force. Israel conquered territory allocated to the Arabs. Anyway, so this is still, I think, globally. The title of your show is Global and India, Global Left and India and Global Left. I think Israel is seen as a colonial enterprise, and correctly so. And the tragedy is that the tragedy of Israel is that the Mizrahim, the Arab Jews, who were forced out of their homes in the Arab world precisely because of this colonial exercise and its unacceptability to the Arab world, and forced to move to Israel, where they were brainwashed about the European Holocaust, which they had nothing to do with. I mean, actually, nobody in the Arab world had anything to do with that. And that has become the dominant national myth, the organizing myth of the Israeli Zionist state. And the Mizrahim, in many ways, like new converts to a cause, seem to be even more extreme in their support of this than the Ashkenazi European Jews who caused the whole thing.
This reminds me of the post the 8th to 9th century expansion of the um, the various Muslim states in Central Asia after excuse me, I'm talking about post roughly 9th to 10th century as the Persian Empire got weakened and it disintegrated.
Well, yes, I mean, Islam spilled out of its
Yeah,
birthplace,
and
and
and the new converts took up those projects of expanding,
right,
and they became more religiously and politically more passionate because they were new
correct.
converts and they had to seek legitimacy to the faith by becoming more extreme. Uh,
It's very interesting, Jyotish, that the battle of the Telas River in Central Asia, which defined the border between the Tang China and the Abbasid Emirate, and the Battle of Tours between the Arab invaders from Spain and Charles Martel, who's my ancestor, by the way, was took place at almost the same time, 752, 756, whatever, I don't know. And you're quite right. Converts tend to be more passionate than those who simply are born into a faith. So this is a problem. It's a problem not only for Muslims or Hindus. It's a problem for Jews. It's a problem for Christians. And I don't know about Buddhists. I don't think they're very aggressive, generally speaking. But yeah, this is a very interesting complication because the weight of Zionism is now borne mainly by the Arab Jews, not by the European Jews.
just the side comments on the Buddhist. It's not entirely accurate if one thinks about Sri Lanka, for instance, because the Sinhala
Oh, well,
Buddhists
yes.
have
That
been
that
extremely.
that I would that I would not classify as religious, but ethnic.
Yeah,
And I
but
know that.
but but most of these quote unquote religious are we know are always political religious. I mean they are always
Oh,
combined,
yeah,
and
no,
ethnicity,
no,
race.
that's correct. I mean, actually, I went to Sri Lanka when I was in Tamil Nadu
Right.
in the 1960s, and I wrote a message because I spoke pretty good Tamil. And I went to the north of Sri Lanka. I said, "There's going to be a civil war here." And I reported that. Nobody paid any attention, of course. But this is like the question people say, well, the Israeli government must have known about October 7th. Yes, the Egyptians formed the Israeli government. Yes, some low level intelligence people figured out what Hamas was planning. But the leadership, the political echelon, did what they usually do when unwelcome news encounters an entrenched policy perspective. They were using Hamas to divide Palestinians. They thought they had Hamas under control. They were complacent. So parts of the Israeli establishment knew what was going to happen, but they were essentially irrelevant. And so, in fact, when motion began on the Gaza side of the border, of the fence, at least there appear to have been some Israeli soldiers told to stand down, not react, because it wasn't a serious thing. Anyway, um, it's an illustration, if you will, that complacency and wishful thinking don't get you very far. And I'm afraid that's what we're seeing in this ceasefire.
I want to come to your point about the Hamas chief negotiator Khalil al-Hayya saying that the negotiator, but we know effectively Washington has given firm he has said as guarantee that the war has ended. Uh, I wanted to ask you. Is there any stake for Trump and his administration if this ceasefire is broken? Because apparently there seems to be a lot of discontentment within his constituency too. We are thinking about Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and others. There is a section from within the conservative movement on which Trump's politics depends on, which has turned completely against Israel. Uh, is there some pressure coming from that constituency, and would there be any impact if Bezalel Smotrich, as he has tweeted out yesterday, that we should immediately start extermination of Hamas and Gaza once the hostages come back?
Well, I wish I could agree that there is effective pressure from these figures on the right. These are mostly online right wingers, people who communicate in the alternative media, the independent media, as you described it earlier. I don't think that President Trump is responsive to them. He's shown no sign of being responsive. And the counterforce, which is Zionist billionaires and their control of American media, mainstream media, will reduces these objections to almost irrelevance, not quite. So I think what will happen, as I said, there will be a ceasefire violation by somebody. It could even be a false flag violation, but there will be a violation. Hamas has been successfully demonized. So have the Palestinian people. They have been dehumanized in the eyes of Americans. And and this is very easy if you've never met a Palestinian, if you have no personal connection. Why shouldn't you believe all the diatribe that is hurled against Palestinians? They never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity and so forth. This is very effective rhetoric. And I think it will prevail. And because President Trump is beholden to these donors, he has made commitments. His own cronies and family are Zionist. Jared Kushner, Stephen Witkoff. And so I think he will go with the flow. And the flow will be anti-Palestinian, not anti-Israeli. Even though if Israel, in fact, does what I suspect they will do, they will pay a further price in terms of American opinion at large. But I don't think that that will sway President Trump to make good on his alleged offer to Hamas.
I wanted to ask you about the Arab world. Of course, we have seen how ineffective they have been, largely speaking. But there are analysts who are saying that there has been a lot of pressure within the Arab world itself because their streets are. I mean, they are silent, but it is quite evident that the population has become very dissatisfied with this inability to stop the genocide in Gaza. And there are reports that say that collectively the Arab world has some leverage within Washington. I wonder what's your analysis about the role of the Arab world insofar as uh, this whole genocide and ceasefire, the whole process goes?
Well, the Arab world is very divided. It is a civilization, a culture, not a nationality, really, and nationalities vary. It's actually, it struck me when I first encountered the Arab world that it had similarities to the United States. That is, you can't tell what an American will look like. He might be black, brown, white, yellow, whatever. He might be tall or short, fat, or well, mostly fat these days. But you can't tell. But what unites us is the English language and various constitutional traditions, or that has united us. I fear we are now so disunited that we may fall into civil strife. In any event, the Arab world, the nations of the Arab world are governed by practitioners of realpolitik. Part of that is a careful attention to public opinion and keeping public opinion below the level at which it explodes into active opposition. And they've gotten very good at that. Those countries in the Gulf that have abundant financial resources have a habit of bribing the public to remain silent. We saw that in the so-called Arab Spring, but not a term I like, but Arab uprisings period 14, 15 years ago. Anyway, I think realpolitik, the other part of it is a capacity for cold-blooded calculation of national interest. And the interesting thing to me is not that the Arab publics are now viscerally anti-Israeli. That doesn't mean they're pro-Palestinian, by the way, because there's a lot of tribalism in the mentality. But viscerally anti-Israeli. This has an impact. But I think the cold calculation has a greater impact, and it's why you see the Arab countries cozying up to Iran, to Turkey, to putting themselves in a broader context of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, with all 57 members. Countries like Malaysia playing a very active role within that constellation, and the Arab world is slowly separating itself from dependence on the West. It is developing new relationships with countries to the south and east, and I mean India, China, and of course it has had much of it has had a constructive relationship with Russia in the form of the Soviet Union and now the Russian Federation. But what is happening is the alienation of over the Israeli genocide of the Arab world from Europeans and North Americans. And we're seeing some interesting partnerships develop between the opponents of genocide in South America, let's say President Petro in Colombia, for example, Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, others. We're also seeing Javier Milei, the Argentine so-called libertarian, I'm not quite sure what he is, the guy with the chainsaw. He is almost a convert to Judaism and very pro-Zionist. So it's interesting. The region, which had been very much focused on patrons in Europe and North America, is now casting a much wider net of relationships. And this is a reaction to this is an answer to the question you posed, I think.
Absolutely. I think this is a very evident change from the times of at least the collapse of the Soviet Union, because during the times of the Soviet Union, the Arab world was split in the sense that they could have two kinds of leverages, and so the Soviet Union, not just militarily but diplomatically, politically, etc. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, basically the split continued, but in a different ways. Some decided to obey the dictates of Washington and Israel, because not doing that would invite a lot of troubles. And then the other side had to really resist, fight, and that had different camps. I think there is a slow moving away from that. Part of it is also, I suspect, is economic reasons, because of new inventions in green technology, question marks about the future of petrochemicals, etc., or petrol, diesel. My final question, Ambassador Freeman, if your time permits. I've been reading the media on this ceasefire, and my own sense is that the coverage this time has been slightly different from what we saw during January through March. There is a very direct, evident celebration, jubilation. Part of it is, of course, coming from people on ground, because they are hopeful, they are cautious, but they are hopeful, they are optimistic, and they have to be in some ways for life to continue. But I think part of it is also because Washington had directed the media to be celebrating, because apparently they needed the Nobel Peace Prize, which didn't happen. It went to the unbelievable so-called Venezuelan opposition, Maria Corina Machado.
Right.
But how do you explain the media coverage of this ceasefire, which is, as you have described, is pretty much a smokescreen, and it's not going to last, but the media is presenting it as if something remarkable has happened?
Well, I think, again, this is a product of redefining the issues to be solely about the hostages. And here we have the issue of American kinship with Israelis, because many powerful Americans, influential Americans in the media and politics, in the legal profession and elsewhere, are Zionist or have a connection to Israel, even if they're not Zionist, and feel the pain of the hostage families in Israel, which is real and deserves our sympathy. And so the jubilation is about the release of the hostages. There's another element here, and that is that President Trump seems to have actually accomplished something. I'm not sure he has, but it's very nice to believe that he did. And by the way, I would have said that Francesca Albanese should have gotten the Nobel Peace Prize, but
Absolutely. I mean, there are many candidates. Some said Greta Thunberg, some said Francisca Albanese, but I would even say that even Trump, the genocide executor, would have been better than Maria Corina Machado. But that's
well, I'm
debatable.
not
I
sure.
agree.
I'm not sure about that, but I mean, it is ironic, and obviously the Nobel Committee is covering its butt by selecting a someone who's part of a regime change operation in Venezuela to receive the prize. Um, and I wonder, my reaction to this actually, Jyotish, was a little different. I thought um, this is the last gasp of Western hubris. So what are we doing? We're interfering in the internal affairs and trying to redirect the politics of a country that is, actually part of the West if you consider it carefully, but not regarded as such. And therefore, you know, but where do Europeans get off now, imagining they can do that? Even Norwegians, who are lovely people, uh, very wealthy and self-assured, and blue-eyed Arabs, as they're called. Even Norwegians um, and Swedes and others in that northern paradise of Scandinavia don't have the authority that they once did, moral authority, and in large measure because of the genocide in Palestine, but also because of the double standards applied to Ukraine and the deceptive coverage of the Ukraine war, which has created what I call the coalition of the deluded in Europe, a group that imagines is practicing fantasy foreign policy, which is even less credible than fantasy football. Since you're part time in Chicago, you undoubtedly know about that. Anyway, so um, I think this is parochial, this reaction, and I don't think it will last very long. The hostages will come out, the bodies will come out. Maybe the bodies won't come out so fast because getting to them is going to be a real problem. But Israel will track any tunnel that leads to a body and blow it up afterwards. So this is. I'm not sure how long the euphoria will last.
We'll leave it there. Ambassador Freeman, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you, Jody, for what you do.
Have a wonderful rest of the day ahead. Bye. I'll send you the link once you upload.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Ayushman. I, along with Jyotisman, have started this platform. In the last 2 years, we have tried to build content for the left and progressive forces. We have interviewed economists, historians, political commentators, and activists so far. If you have liked our content so far and want us to build an archive for the left, I have two requests for you. Please do consider donating for the cause. Link is in the description below. Also, if you are not able to do so, don't feel sad. You can always like our videos and share our videos to your comrades. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button.